Hey, Blake T. Wilde here, and welcome to Cover Comics, a new series where I just take comic books that I love, put them under this camera right here, and just talk about them ad nauseum, analyze them, discuss them, go into what sort of subtext there may or may not be, you know, that whole shindig rigmarole. And I know what you're thinking. Blake, you're not a professional in the industry who has 20 plus years of experience like some other people might. Well, that's true. I am not a professional in the comic book industry. Yet. But I am absolutely obsessed with comics and storytelling and the whole entire 2D medium of the subject. I love just comics completely. As you can see behind me, this bookshelf right here is littered with comics, single issues ordered in alphabetical order by company. That took quite a while to do. And this black cabinet right here has tons of trade paperbacks, graphic novels, omnibuses. You should see the towers of comics I have next to my bedside. My wife hates it, but I don't, because I love reading comics. And I want to share my love of comics in a more in-depth way via this series. But I do make my own comics, such as The Custodians, Agents of Cross, a love letter to the Silver Age era. Each issue of The Custodians, Agents of Cross is over 60 pages of pure comics, written, illustrated, colored, lettered, designed. Everything you see in these books was created entirely by myself. And this asks the all-important question, what if the only heroes that can save the world are an intelligent baboon, a girl who controls fire, the world's smartest man with the power of elasticity only in his right arm, and a four-armed werewolf? And this just follows their exploits. Like I said, it is a love letter to the 60s, Silver Age, and to all of comics in general. As you'll see as the series progresses to its 6th and final issue. This entire first issue, however, is posted in its entirety on my Patreon, patreon.com/Smokey'sVideos, where you can read the entire thing for only $2. Normally this book, I sell it for $15, which already is a far better deal than anything you're getting from Marvel or DC these days. But as little as $2 a month, you can get access to the entire issue. And I am serializing issue 2 as we speak. But that's not all, because I also have my sci-fi, zany, just crazy fun series, fun for the whole family, all-age comic, DESTRUCTO Boy. DESTRUCTO Boy follows this little robot guy right here as he lives on a giant space station in the far-flung future, and he battles crime, giant robots, giant monsters, and evil conquerors from space such as Grimlax the Astro Knight. Each of these issues just introduces as much zany sci-fi craziness as I could fit into these books. They're being serialized on my Patreon as I speak as well, and you can pick up all 5 issues on my Etsy shop, blaketwilde.etsy.com. Each purchase comes with a free head sketch of any character of your choosing. So check it out on my Patreon, on my Etsy. It really helps me out. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more content just like this. So what are we discussing today? Well, this is pretty much the first graphic novel, hence the title. This is Blackmark by Gil Kane and Archie Goodwin, although you won't see Archie Goodwin's name anywhere on these original prints. I think Fantagraphics, when they reprinted him sometime in the 2000s, they actually added his name back on there. This is by, as I said before, Gil Kane, primarily. He's the guy who came up with the story. And Gil Kane, infamously known throughout the comic book industry after he was fired from Marvel, more or less, in the 80s for allegedly stealing original comic art that wasn't his. There's a great story recounting just what happened when he was discovered doing this by Archie Goodwin, of all people, published in Ted McKeever's Pencilhead, which is kind of like a biography kind of thing, about Gil Kane being caught sneaking around the Marvel offices in the middle of the night by Archie, and he would come into the offices late when pretty much nobody was there. Archie caught him, leaving with a big portfolio under his arm. This was about, according to the story, third or fourth time Archie had seen him doing this, and he asked what was inside. Gil Kane told him it was just some stuff he was working on. Archie asked to take a look, and inside were pages from Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, John Romita, God knows who else. Archie took the pages back, demanded Gil Kane return them, and he was never going to get work from Marvel Comics ever again. Gil Kane returned about 35 pages. God knows what else he had that he didn't give back, but that is the infamous sort of setting for Gil Kane after that. Al Milgrom, famous editor and writer at Marvel Comics, explained that Gil Kane was not enough of a human being to work at Marvel. Jim Shooter has referred to art theft from that era by an artist who will remain nameless, but that wouldn't happen for another 10 to 12-ish years or so, because Blackmark came out in 1971. 7-8 years before Will Eisner's famous A Contract with God, which is pretty much what everybody associates as being the first graphic novel. We had this in 1971. Of course, this is not what we typically think of as a graphic novel, as you will see inside, although it is it is more of a graphic novel than what graphic novels became, you know, a big comic. This is literally a graphic novel, and it's referred to as such on the sequel series, which was published by Marvel Comics several years later, because Blackmark did not work. It didn't sell well. Apparently there were issues between the publisher and Gil Kane. There was going to be a total of 8 of these books in the series, and the initial print run was meant to be published the first and second book, and then within the same month, and then the next month publish the third book. They didn't do that. Gil Kane blamed Bern Hogarth, famous artist for the Tarzan series, for just kind of shit-talking the whole idea and concept, and sort of getting in the ear of the publishers themselves. But that's conjecture, that's hearsay, who's to say if that's really true. But it did not continue. Several years later, it was republished in Conan series at Marvel as like backups of the this first initial story, and then eventually it was published in Marvel Preview featuring Blackmark number 17, an all-new graphic novel masterpiece, The Mind Demons. And this was what was it, 78, 79. So this is, you know, already very early graphic novel use of the phrase. Again, it is literally a graphic novel. Here's this will just be easier to sort of flick through. This is pretty much what the smaller book looks like that I'll go over in just a couple moments. This one is a bit of a letdown compared to the original because the art is less. It's a lot more loose, as you can probably see from down here. It's almost a Frank Miller evolution. This little face of this demon bat thing. Where the original, it was still stylized, but it was detailed. This one, like I said, it just becomes a lot looser. But the interesting thing to note, I'll go over this in the future if anybody is ever interested. Let me get my sexy Harley Quinn bookmark out of the way. But it's this panel right here of Blackmark driving his sword through the face of this snake-helmeted villain, the sonic-powered sword of Amarix. Does that not resemble the canceled panel by Todd McFarlane in that Juggernaut Spider-Man X-Force story? What was it? Sabotage? Like, that's almost the exact same pose, if I remember correctly. The sword's going the same way. I believe the Todd McFarlane panel is sort of from a side profile. But that, like the hands and the exaggerated finger positions, how they're, you know, really going for it, that just looks like something Todd McFarlane would have done. And I wonder if he picked this up and just, this panel really stood out to him, because this is 1979. Where else are you going to see a damn panel like this where a dude's getting stabbed through the eyeball? And then an even gorier scene is this one right here, where he's falling and the blood and just viscera from his face is trailing behind him. Good lord. But that's not yet. Let's move on from this. That's still about 8 years into the future at the point when Blackmark initially comes out. Blackmark, a new full-length action-adventure in words and pictures. First in a series of daring adventures featuring Blackmark in a primitive world of the future. It is a sword and science tale. It's almost He-Man-esque, where it's a primitive sort of medieval society, but they have scientific machinery. It's wizards. Ralph Bakshi's Wizards is very reminiscent of this. Came out late 70s, 77 or so as Wizards, because that was Mark Hamill's first ever movie role, is a voice in there. But this strange zebra horse insect creature, and Blackmark, the titular Blackmark on its back, is kind of reminiscent of the Wizards poster, I feel, especially with the just, the general white background. And then, of course, we get the classic pocket novel sort of description of what happens. The rocket stood in the middle of the arena. To the warlords, it was a superstitious symbol of a lost world. To the people, it was a prophecy of freedom. The man who could unlock its mystery was born to control the future. Somewhere in the depths of Blackmark's mind lay the key. Blackmark! As the lightning strikes, he was a slave and a gladiator. He was fighting for the world, and he had to win. Blackmark by Gil Kane, coming to a theater near you. I could easily have seen this becoming adapted as a, like they did with He-Man in the 80s or something. If you are interested in this book, there are a lot of copies available on eBay, ranging between $8 to $20, so it's not as hard to find as you'd expect. Again, this just sort of goes over the world of Blackmark, aka New Earth, when the world was ravaged and science was only a legend from the past. His struggle against the forces of evil, ignorance, and superstition reunited the people and bound them with a legacy that held the world's only hope. A new fusion of images and words in an action book. The next step forward in pictorial fiction. How cool is that? Just, that is such a badass way of saying this is an evolved comic book. This is a graphic novel. And it opens up with this beautiful splash page of, by Gil Kane, by Blackmark, atop his weird little insect horse. It almost is kind of reminiscent of the horses from Avatar, now that I'm thinking about it. They have a similar sort of facial structure, and it's like a malnourished dog mixed with a horse. And this down here is the Blackmark symbol that we will see in a few pages. So here's the establishing. I love the layout of the panels in this book, especially for pages like this. It's just a very interesting way. So a classic novel has a preface. This is ours in a new pictorial, fictional storytelling manner. Old Earth is dead, devastated by the nuclear holocausts. New Earth lives on as a shadow world, inhabited by the vestiges of humanity, divided into tyrannical, petty kingdoms, racked by fear, superstition, and barbaric poverty. Strange, fearsome, mutated beasts roam the blasted lands and swim the poisoned seas, while on the cold northern frontiers, a whole new ace of malformed men with strange mental powers plots the eventual conquest of the planet from the fortress of the Psi Keep. Theirs is the power to conjure mind demons even worse than those which stalk the earth. And that, of course, is what the sequel would have been, and that is what is published in the Marvel Previews comic, is the whole Psi Keep saga, at least the... But as you can see, this is literally in the most... But as you can see, this is, in the most literal sense, a graphic novel. There are captions for when the characters speak, but is also, like, just the overall sort of prose narration. And this is Zeph, I believe, and Marnie. They're attempting to cross the demon wastes. As you can see, they are just horrible creatures that just roam the landscape. The interesting thing, once we get to it, so again, as you can see, based on the art from what I showed you before to this, here's another tremendous looking. I suppose you can call this a splash page. And there is her birthmark called the Blackmark. Kind of biblical, as we'll see in the next coming pages. These are former royalty. This man is the former King Amarix of the Westlands. He and his faithful servant, Balmuthus, or something along those lines, they are on the run. Balsamo, that is his name, Balsamo. They are on the run because the king has been overthrown. Again, there's no magic in these stories. It's science. It's the world before this was some technologically advanced super society, and everything just went wrong. And so now what humanity is left with is a ruined Earth and trying to just figure out how these old pieces of technological devices worked. But science is sort of seen as a heretical superstition. It's a black magic, more or less. But anyway, these two guys are here because the king has been overthrown, and his faithful servant, Balsamo, have been traveling across the wastes, attempting to escape. And then for some reason, an interesting thing is that Amarix asks her if she has a child, specifically a son. And when she says no, she claims herself to be barren. He goes, "By the gods, there may be a chance." And Balsamo empties a pack from their mule. And as you can see already, just with the amount of screen tones and hatching, and there's just far more detail and care went into this than what we saw in the first book I looked over, the Marvel Previews sequel to this. And that makes sense. If you're Gil Kane and it's the early 70s and you're promised to get these 8 pages done, he also claimed that he was getting underpaid to do it anyway. So he was really banking on the royalties from those first 3 books being released within 2 months. And then the publisher doesn't do that. They just release the first book, and it doesn't get noticed. That was a big thing that he makes a point of in this section that I read, is that the idea was that, oh, well, if we get 2 books out at the same time, then I'll really stand out. And then if we get the 3rd book in a couple weeks later, within the next month, then people will be like, oh my god, what is this? Blackmark? Where the hell did this come from? But they never did that. So by the time Gil Kane gets around to actually, probably finishing this story, you'd have to imagine the love and dedication isn't there anymore. This Blackmark really could have been something. Gil Kane could have gone on to have truly pioneered an all-new idea of what graphic novels were in the early 70s with those alleged 8 books that were supposed to be made. But that just never happened, and then he ended up stealing a bunch of artwork. But you can see the care and the love and dedication that goes into the first book. And then by the time, again, that they get to Marvel Preview, that just really isn't there. I'd imagine it was a failure in his eyes. It's a failure in probably most people's eyes. It's not a bad story. It's a very fun story. It's Conan meets sci-fi. Like I said, it's sword and science. But there can't be that dedication there that there once had been, because just from that first page I read, he's already talking about what's going to happen in this book. And if he knows that this book is the last one, that no one's really going to continue this series, then just kind of why bother? And it's a depressing sort of view on just the creativity and the artistic freedom that storytelling and comics allowed, just to get all these ideas out there, just the excitement of creating and storytelling and making these brand new crazy worlds. And then that's just crushed by the greed of a publisher, the sort of backtalk of, oh, well, you know, it failed because we didn't do what we said we were going to do, but we're still not going to bother to do anything about it. So, boop, fuck you. You know, Gil Kane, have whatever thoughts you want about him, especially after the whole art theft thing. But it's a very depressing look at... He's another artist that got screwed over in the end. Yes, he was stealing comic pages. Original art. Oftentimes those would just be filed away. Sometimes they were thrown away. Very rarely were they actually returned to the artist until about the mid-'80s, when the whole Kirby Return His Art campaign was in the process and really got big with the public knowledge. But Gil Kane was just another one of those artists who got screwed over by a greedy industry. Anyway, the interesting thing I realized going over this story again is that there are a lot of similarities between a couple different stories here. Obviously, it later becomes Conan once we get to about... Oh, perfect page. He becomes a slave, Blackmark, once he grows up. He's also, as you can see, a tan-skinned, darker-hued man with black hair, similar to how Conan the Barbarian is described in his... in the novels by Howard. But it also is very similar to two completely but altogether similar stories. Those being the story of Christ, Jesus Christ, and Superman. So, Amarix tells her that if she'll humor a dying king's request, she may very well be the savior, or the mother of the new Earth's savior. He wants her to sire a child for him, not through the classic way. Instead, he tells her, when I die, as I soon shall, I want to leave behind some of the scientific knowledge I struggled so hard and long to amass. I want to transfer it to the brain and blood and body of another. The knowledge of mankind, the science of old Earth must not die. And she says, I love this little back and forth, but such wizardry, science as you call it, brought us to this ruin. You're wrong. Abuse of that knowledge, not the knowledge itself, wrought the destruction and holocaust. And then he offers her essentially a purse full of whatever their currency is to bear this child and possess within it the scientific knowledge that he has. She, is very put off by this and confused how it's even going to work. And eventually they show her the amount of money that, they desperately need. Balsamo sort of reassures her by showing her the advanced machinery that is going to allow them to transfer the essence of knowledge, here we go, into her child's mind. This immaculate conception, as it were, of a secular son of God, for the most part. It's very strange, and especially this. Look how impossibly just out there this panel is. A face appeared. It might have easily been one of the warrior princes she dreamed of as a young girl, come to carry her away at last. Of course, that is her son as an adult that she sees during this machine transfer sequence. And then she loses the projection in her mind after stumbling through the strange mind space. As the pursuers arrive, and the king and Balsamo continue their escape into the wastes. And as they ride away, he tells her that a child will be hers. A child of destiny. And, of course, they continue on. Her husband returns. Her Josephinian husband to Marnie's Mary. Joseph. It's all there. this like strange little cottage pram that they put her in. It's essentially it's the retelling of Jesus in this new world, but with giant lizards escaping the earth. He is born, and eventually we get to chapter 2, which cuts ahead a few years to the part of, and then it becomes, like I said, it becomes almost a Superman tale. By the time Blackmark was 5, he had learned to run swiftly, climb trees, shatter firewood with a deft two-handed stroke of the short sword. He also has the black mark right here, similar to his mother. But this is Superboy. This is Super Baby. And the other Superman part that I was getting at that I realized is that this is very similar to what will be John Byrne's reinvigoration of Superman, Man of Steel. It reinvented Krypton as this weird, just horribly clinical world, pretty much what we see in Zack Snyder's film, if you're unaware. And Superman gets that, DNA stuff created. He's not created through normal biological means. It's something all completely different. It's like a machine or something along those lines. I can't really remember, but in a way that's pretty much the same idea that's being told here. If you want to make a black and white comic book, this is definitely something to take a look at, just to look at how Gil Kane and the other inkers, because he did get help from a couple people. Neil Adams, we'll see a page later that's apparently claimed to be one of the pages that he inked. Harvey Kurtzman apparently did layouts for the pages just to help, get speeded along. And just the incredible sci-fi lunacy of these designs and just this horribly strange world. This is their village is being attacked. Blackmark's not there. His father gets killed, and they rape his mother. And then, as you can see, they, right in front of the boy, as they watch him, or as he's forced to watch, as they wear these almost Jack Kirby-clad outfits. And then he, of course, kills her. He runs out into the middle of the woods, nowhere. I will make you pay. I will make the whole earth pay by making the earth mine, ruled by me, Blackmark. You can see that being the end of like an episode if this was a episodic retelling of it. As he stood there trembling with defiance, his head began to swim with strange, terrible visions. He saw masses of numbers, formulas, equations, overwhelming in their intricacies, yet somehow familiar. He saw cylinder-shaped vessels with fire at their tails leaping into star-clustered skies. He saw a bright, detailed image of a series of upright rods made of crystal, each possessing a large crystal knob at the upper end. And with a sudden premonition, Blackmark knew, though their meaning now escaped him, they would all affect his life, his destiny, his conquest of the sprawling hovel men called New Earth. Crystals, Superman. Look at this. I was just about to say, if you look at early Mike Mignola artwork, I should have got it. There's an Amazing Heroes issue I have where it has early Mike Mignola art. But it's very reminiscent of this style of Gil Kane's work, this black and white with the screen tones. Look at this and tell me that does not look exactly like a Mike Mignola composition. From the feet being hidden behind this protruding rock to the just layers and depths of various pieces of the illustration in there, the energy swirling around him, just the general pose of young Blackmark. Chapter 3, here we go. So this is after he's been enslaved. It's like 10-something years later. He has been taken to the Westlands, the aforementioned Westlands, where King Kargan is now ruling. Blackmark has been a slave for pretty much all of his life. He's a gladiator. They make note that he has attempted to cause slave uprisings in the past, and the King Kargan's young wife, Queen, has a fancy for him. Here is the page. This is the page that is allegedly was penciled, or not penciled, inked by none other than Neil Adams. Although if I look at this face right here, also kind of seems kind of Neil Adamsy. But this is what they call the Warlock's Shrine. And this is a... it becomes, at this point, King Arthur and the Sword in the Stone, because that's essentially what this is. It's a flying spaceship from the old ages of science. Others say that it is a Warlock's Shrine. If someone moves this, removes it from the very earth it has been embedded in, then they are said to become the King of New Earth. And it's centered right in the middle of the warriors' kind of gladiatorial arena. We get some just melodrama going on with the queen wanting to bang Blackmark. He's not having any of it, sort of in that Conan way where, you know, he's a ladies' man and he will have sex with plenty of women, but at the same time he has a mission he's set on accomplishing and he doesn't want any of it, so he gets into a fight with one of the slave masters. Everybody starts swarming him and he gets captured again. They even refer to him as a barbarian here. So he's thrown into this slave pits where he meets none other than Balsamo, the old wizard of the Westland King, who's been imprisoned. And just I love, because it's black and white, and it's from early 70s, so there's not a whole lot they could really do with it. So the screen tones just become everything, really. Like, it would be so flat if they didn't have all these beautiful screen tones to give depth and detail to the art. It would still look fantastic, but it wouldn't be the same. This is the flame lizard that they bring in to fight the Balsamo and Blackmark. Of course, he handily defeats it by leaping off of that giant statue and driving his sword again through the eye of the creature. He really likes aiming for the eyes there. I love this two-panel section. The flame lizard is what stands out. Obviously, it's the most dangerous thing in this panel, and the statue, of course, has the darkest hue of the screen tone. Balsamo has some gray to sort of drive him to the middle of the action, while Blackmark and the fire lizard are rendered purely in just inks and the white of the paper. Even the sky has some screen tone to it, but it just drives forward that these two right here are the just most dangerous things on this page. This is where the action is. It's not about Balsamo, it's about Blackmark, it's about this fire lizard. And then when he strikes the beast, it shades into the background with the screen tone, and it just becomes all about Blackmark. Again, it's covered in a screen tone as he leaps towards the camera and rips his sword out of the eye of the mighty beast and hoists it asunder. And I love, again, playing with the screen tones, making him dark, one, to show his complexion, two, to just make him stand out. But the sword is rendered in just complete white. Again, another Frazetta-esque Mike Mignola sort of piece of art. Mike Mignola would do a lot of hatching like this, like the real crazy lines like that, and the powerful, almost Kirby crackle in the background. This does seem up Mike Mignola's sort of path of interests, so I really would not be surprised to learn that he was reading this. This is another Neil Adams looking face and just kind of ink style. I don't know how many pages he did ink, but this kind of... I'm terrible at figuring out who the inkers are on books, but this just kind of reads as Neil Adams to me. But this is Blackmark essentially saying, "Are you not entertained? I defeated the beast. We are to be allowed freedom." King Kerrigan is not having any of it, as we get another sort of bookmark panel, diagonal. They draw their bows, prepare to kill both of them. Balsamo tells him to calm his ass down, and he tells the young man that the crowd love him, and they're calling for more than fair play for a champion lad. There's revolution in that cry. All it needs is something to ignite it, a sign, a miracle. And of course, Balsamo, being very familiar with who Blackmark is, the savior, this Superman, tells him to enter the rocket, or the wizard's shrine. And again, just beautiful playing with the screen tones, and he enters the ship. The glowing rods of crystal, exactly as I saw them. Everything is as it came to me as a boy. Balsamo spoke the truth. I know, I do know. And what should happen in just this climactic, cinematic scene? The whole ground, the whole stadium shakes and trembles, and then the rocket just ignites out of the pure earth. The sand of the arena exploded, belching flame and smoke geysered in all directions, bringing with it a shower of rock and earth, scorching the air to a furnace heat. The countryside echoed with the sound of cataclysm, and the ancient craft shrugged away, mud and mire of the ages, lifting its needle prow toward the sky. The new king of earth! The Testasmata king has come as he soars into the stratosphere. And inside, what should he find? A sword to be wielded by a king. And this sword, as we will later find out, is not just any normal sword. A sword that shrieks and crackles with strange lashing power. So he, expertly using the knowledge of his 4 scientist fathers, returns the ship back to the Earth, as the citizens are just going nuts. The revolution has begun, and it will not be televised. Blackmark enters the arena as the soldiers, I'd imagine, who are still loyal to King Kargan orders, are ordered to kill him. It doesn't work, as he just expertly kills just everyone who stands in his way. And eventually he makes it to the king, and his closest soldiers take him to a little panic room, but Blackmark gets into the throne area, and the king offers him 100 gold pieces to anyone who kills him, and or anyone who even hurts him, and 1,000 to whoever claims the demon slave's head. Of course, no one's getting paid because Blackmark easily kills him. And I should also note, something that I did pass over, is that the man who killed Blackmark's parents and raped his mother, if I can find it. Anyway, the guy who did that, he was in the crowd with the queen and the king. So Blackmark demands to know who that warlord was. Very Conan the Barbarian-esque. He demands the name, because he killed, he tells Kargan that what he did. And Kargan tells him that he is glad that the warlord killed this wretched little slave's pitiful parents. Like a bursting geyser, the life breath hissed from Kargan. Wood splintered as Blackmark's sword point tore through the back of the throne with the force of his thrust, followed by a moist, crackling sound as the heavy, ornate hilt smashed against the tyrant's chest, crushing the bone within. And this is just a beautiful, almost EC Comics-esque, with the little motion lines as his, the life drains from his body. Just goes to show that we don't need to see the violence. It can be hidden, and it's far better conveyed just emotionally and just from a storytelling standpoint, more so than if we just saw a panel of Blackmark just fully driving the sword through his chest, his rippling muscles, you know. This works just so much better. And the king is... I'd imagine that since he was sitting down when Blackmark sort of pulled the sword back, the king's body came with it a little bit. Meanwhile, people outside are trying to kill the queen as well. And the warlord, here he is, he uses her as essentially a human shield, and she is struck by a sword as he just narrowly escapes the closing gates of the city. And Balsamo speaks to Blackmark, pretty much tells him that, you know, he's in charge now. And he stands before his people as they cheer him on. We felled a tyrant and won a kingdom, and yet it is only a step on the path I wish to take. I've pledged my sword not to one land, but the earth. That is where I lead. Will you follow? But then, what should appear but a weird serpent-like demon dragon, mutant thing over the sky. Blackmark grabs a bow and arrow from somebody in the crowd, launches an arrow, it goes straight through it, and the creature flies away in silence in the direction of the Psy Keep. Dun dun dun! And then we get this little image of Gil Kane drawn in the back, which gives us a sort of author's biography of who he was. But that is Blackmark, the world's first graphic novel. Again, just a fine piece of storytelling, a genius idea for the time that was unfortunately maybe a little too ahead of its time. Graphic novels really didn't start to be that much of a thing until 80s or so with Watchmen. That's like probably the biggest one you can probably think of. This was, what, 15 years before Watchmen even came out? And Gil Kane was trying to just invent a new storytelling method for comic books. Unfortunately, it did not work out, but imagine if it did. And we had 7 more books of Blackmark. It could have changed comics forever. Probably not, but it could have. As always, let me know what you thought in the comments below. Let me know if you have any recommendations or suggestions on what I should cover. Like and subscribe, as always. And check out my Instagram, @NotBlakeWilde, my Patreon, patreon.com/Smokey'sVideos for my comics, early access to videos when available, and original art, and my Etsy shop, blaketwilde.etsy.com. As always, and I will see you next time when I go cover to cover. Bye!